The law firm of Harrison and Associates exuded the kind of wealth that didn't need to shout. It whispered through the dark mahogany walls and smug oil portraits of long-dead partners. I waited outside the conference room in a leather armchair, calm on the surface, watching as my siblings arrived one after the other, all of them choosing to act like I wasn't even there. Michael showed up first, dressed in a custom-tailored Italian suit, his face already wearing that well-practiced smirk he'd perfected during 4 decades as our father's undisputed favorite. Next came Elizabeth, wrapped in couture-like armor, her diamond-stacked fingers flying over her phone as she texted without looking up. And finally, Thomas wandered in, rumpled and unshaven, trying and failing to pretend he hadn't just rolled out of bed. "Miss Carter," the receptionist called gently. "Mr. Harrison says the meeting is for heirs only." I didn't need to look to know my siblings were smiling, the smug kind of smile that only comes from seeing someone excluded. This is exactly what they'd hoped for, maybe even orchestrated. "Funny thing about that," I said smoothly, rising as I picked up my briefcase, "I have a scheduled appointment with Mr. Harrison." "Sarah," Michael cut in, his voice thick with patronizing concern. "There's no need to humiliate yourself. We all know Dad cut you off years ago." "Ah yes. The infamous exile. All because I dared to decline a seat at the family's real estate empire, choosing instead to build something of my own. He'd disowned me that day, declaring I was no longer his daughter. What he didn't know was what I'd been working on while they weren't paying attention." "Actually," I replied, glancing at my watch, "I'm right on time for my 10 o'clock. Just then, the conference room door opened and James Harrison himself stepped out. He blinked in surprise when he saw me but quickly recovered his professional composure. "Miss Carter, thank you for coming," he said, stepping aside. "Everyone, please come in." Michael's face darkened. "Jim, she's not supposed to be here. Dad made that very clear." "About his will, yes," Harrison interjected calmly. "But Miss Carter has relevant information that needs to be addressed first." I followed them inside and took the seat directly across from my siblings. The leather creaked beneath me as I placed my briefcase on the polished table. "Before we begin the will reading," Harrison said, "Miss Carter has requested a few minutes to present some documents." "This is absurd," Elizabeth snapped, finally looking up from her phone. "Everyone knows Sarah was cut out. She's just trying to stir things up. As usual." I smiled and unlatched my briefcase, pulling out several neatly organized folders. "Actually, Liz," I said, "I'm here to save us all some time. Before we get into what Dad supposedly left behind, we should probably talk about what he actually owned when he passed." Thomas blinked, struggling to focus. Whether it was confusion or another hangover, it was hard to tell. "What do you mean?" he asked. "Dad owned everything. The apartment complexes, the office buildings, the shopping centers." "Did he?" I asked, spreading documents across the table. "Because these property deeds suggest otherwise." Michael snatched the folder nearest to him and flipped it open. The color drained from his face. This has to be a mistake." "Oh, but it's not," I said, calmly laying out the rest of the documents. "While you were all busy mismanaging Dad's empire, I was quietly acquiring each property, one by one, using shell corporations and investment groups. Didn't you ever wonder who those mysterious new competitors were?" Elizabeth's hands trembled as she turned through the pages, her expensive rings flashing under the lights. "The Riverside Apartments, the Maxwell Office Park, the Highland Shopping Complex," she muttered. "Carter Investment Group," I finished for her. "My company. Well, one of them. I own several." "That's not possible," Michael stammered. "Those are billion-dollar assets." "They are," I confirmed with a nod. "And I've owned them for quite some time now." Dad was too consumed by his anger over me leaving the family business to notice I was building one of my own, a far more successful one. Harrison cleared his throat. "This is precisely why we're here. Miss Carter now holds legal ownership over roughly 85% of the assets you all assumed were part of your inheritance." Silence gripped the room. Even Thomas looked fully awake now, pale and stunned. "How?" he whispered. "Remember when Dad started having cash flow problems about 3 years ago?" I asked, settling back into my chair. When he began liquidating properties to keep the business afloat. Who did you think was buying them? I watched their faces as I continued. It started with the Riverside apartments, I said. Dad refused to sell to large corporations. He always prided himself on selling locally, so when Highland Investment Partners made an offer, he jumped. What he didn't know was that HIP was mine. I let that sink in. Then came Maxwell Office Park, purchased through Summit Enterprises. Also mine. And by the time I acquired the Highland shopping complex, he was practically giving things away. But the company, Michael protested. The family business is basically just a management firm now, I said, finishing the thought for him. And guess what? It manages properties that I own. You've all been working for me for the past 3 years. Elizabeth's face had changed, not shocked anymore, but sharp, calculating. Classic Liz, always seeking leverage. Dads can still contest the sales, she said. We can argue you manipulated him. No, you can't, Harrison cut in. I oversaw each and every transaction. They were above board, market rate deals with no coercion involved. Miss Carter simply saw opportunities the rest of you didn't. He paused, letting his words settle. She had superior business instincts compared to, well, other stakeholders. Did Dad know? Thomas asked, voice soft. In the end, yes, I said, feeling the tiniest flicker of something, guilt, maybe, or just the echo of a memory. I told him 2 weeks before he passed. I looked at them, my voice steady. Would you like to hear what he said? They leaned in, curiosity outweighing their pride. He laughed, I said quietly, my voice steady. Not bitter, not angry. Just genuinely amused. Told me he should have guessed the daughter who walked away would be the one to outmaneuver him. Michael's complexion darkened, his jaw clenched so tightly it looked painful. This is some elaborate con, he spat. A setup. You're manipulating something. Would you like to see the wire transfers? I asked, sliding more folders across the table. Here are the sales contracts, bank records, property evaluations, and rental income reports. While the 3 of you were pretending to be tycoons, I was quietly building an empire. But you run a boutique firm downtown, Elizabeth objected, her voice rising. That boutique firm is the headquarters of a multi-billion-dollar conglomerate, I corrected, calm and sharp. Just because I don't wear my wealth like a costume doesn't mean it isn't real. Dad figured that out, eventually. Harrison gave a small, courteous cough. Perhaps this would be the appropriate moment to begin the will's reading. I nodded and leaned back, enjoying the storm I had stirred. To my children, Michael, Elizabeth, and Thomas, Harrison began, I leave what remains of my business holdings and real estate interests, which, as Miss Carter has clarified, now consist largely of the family's property management company and a handful of minor assets. The silence that followed was thick. My siblings looked like they'd just been dropped into cold water. And to my daughter, Sarah, Harrison continued, and I saw them all flinch at the unexpected mention of my name, I leave my private art collection, my personal residences, and this message, you proved me wrong, and I've never been prouder to be wrong in my life. Elizabeth's phone slipped from her hand and hit the table with a sharp clatter. But the art collection, that's worth more than the company. I smiled, not unkindly. Yes, it is. Funny how things work out. Michael shot to his feet. This can't stand. I'm calling our attorneys. By all means, I replied, stacking my documents. But you may want to review your management contracts first. Most of them expire next month. And guess who gets to decide who renews? The weight of that statement settled like lead in the room. Without those contracts, their company, what little was left of it, would be essentially worthless. You wouldn't, Thomas said, almost pleading. We're family. Were we family? I said, my voice cool, when you stood by as Dad erased me from everything? When you mocked the firm I built from the ground up? When you whispered through the industry that I was irrelevant? I rose and smoothed out my blazer. But you're right. We are family. Which is why I'm offering you jobs. Real ones. No favors. No titles. Entry level, just like everyone else. Elizabeth gasped. Entry level? Are you serious? Dead serious, I replied. What you have is not experience. It's a lifetime of spending Dad's money. Now you can learn what it means to earn it. From the corner, Harrison was biting back a smirk. He'd been privy to decades of family dysfunction. This was probably the most entertaining morning of his entire career. The contracts, Michael said, his voice now devoid of bluster. How much? Let's talk Monday. My office. 9 a.m. Don't be late, I said. Unlike Dad, I'm not lenient about punctuality. As I reached the door, I paused. Oh, and Elizabeth? That penthouse Dad gifted you? Market rates go into effect next month. Nothing personal. Just business. The last thing I heard as I walked out was Thomas murmuring, "It's like we were playing Monopoly and she was playing chess." In the elevator, the adrenaline began to fade, and the full weight of everything settled on me. Dad's final words echoed in my mind. You didn't abandon the family business, Sarah. You rebuilt it. Better. My phone buzzed. A message from Mayo. How'd it go? Exactly as planned, I replied. Tell HR to prepare 3 onboarding packets. Also, get in touch with building management. Elizabeth's rent needs adjusting. Another ping. Savage. I love it. Lunch. Can't. Appraisal appointment. Turns out Dad had better taste in art than heirs. I stepped into the sunlight, the skyline glittering like a crown around me. Most of those buildings now fell under the umbrella of companies I owned. Not bad for the so-called disappointment of the family. Another call came in. Michael. I declined and sent a quick reply. Business inquiries only. Please forward your resume before Monday. Dress code applies. Sometimes, revenge isn't about retribution. It's about rising so far above the people who doubted you that they have to look up just to see your shadow. And sometimes, legacy isn't about what you're given. It's about what you build, quietly, relentlessly, while everyone else is busy waiting to be handed something. Dad figured that out too late. Now, it was their turn to learn. Monday was going to be illuminating. After all, nothing humbles someone quite like finding out the sister they disregarded owns the ground beneath their feet.